What if I told you that the most powerful person in a town wasn't the mayor or a wealthy business owner, but an elderly woman sitting behind a folding table on a cracked sidewalk, ignored by most, forgotten by many, but quietly changing lives one by one until an entire community owed her everything? Today we uncover the moving story of Miss Odella Mae Carter, a woman whose kindness built an empire of hope, even as the world rushed past her without a second glance. Stay with us because this is a story you will feel deep in your heart, and one you won't soon forget. Before we dive in, if you believe in the power of unsung heroes and the beauty of small acts of kindness, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We share true and inspired stories that honor the invisible hands shaping our world. And after you hear Miss Odella's journey, we would love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Tell us about someone who inspired you without ever asking for anything in return. Now, let's step onto the sunlit streets of Willow Creek, Mississippi, and meet the woman the world almost missed. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction. Any names, characters, places, and events are products of the author's imagination or are used in a fictional manner. The purpose of this story is to share moral lessons, inspire motivation, and provide meaningful reflections for viewers. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. We hope this story uplifts, enlightens, and encourages all who listen. In the small, sun-worn town of Willow Creek, Mississippi, an elderly woman named Miss Odella Mae Carter quietly tends to her humble table on the sidewalk, day after day, selling homemade goods. To the busy townsfolk, she is just another invisible face, a fixture of the streets, overlooked and unremarkable. But hidden beneath her weathered hands and gentle smiles is a lifetime of seeds planted in the hearts of dreamers. Unbeknownst to all, Miss Odella has helped hundreds of women rise from nothing, guiding them to build their own businesses and reshape the soul of the community. When the truth finally surfaces and City Hall comes calling, the town must reckon with how easily they dismissed the woman who carried them all. This is the story of unseen greatness, silent sacrifice, and a legacy stronger than any monument. Stay with us as we unfold the quiet, powerful life of a woman who built an empire, one small kindness at a time. The sun always seemed a little hotter on Willow Street. Maybe it was the way the heat clung to the pavement, making the air shimmer, or maybe it was the stories whispered through the creaking porches and rusted screen doors of this small Mississippi town. Either way, every morning, long before the first shops opened, Miss Odella Mae Carter was already there, setting up her little table under the crooked oak tree at the corner of Willow and Main. Her hands, weathered but steady, moved with the rhythm of long practice. She laid out her sweetgrass baskets, the soap she had stirred and poured herself, the knitted scarves in colors as soft as a faded hem. A foldable chair, its paint peeling, sat behind the table. In it, Miss Odella perched like a queen watching over a kingdom no one else seemed to notice. People passed by without stopping, their faces turned to their phones, their arms full of shopping bags. Some nodded, some did not. To most, she was invisible, a fixture like the cracked sidewalk or the ancient stoplight that blinked uneven when it was not needed. The children sometimes giggled and called her the sidewalk lady. The older folks just shook their heads and muttered about how she had been sitting out there since before they had been born. Miss Odella never minded. She knew what the world saw, a tiny old woman selling trinkets for a few crumpled bills. But what the world did not see was the way her table was more than just a table. It was a school, a sanctuary, and sometimes a lifeline. When the day grew long and the heat too heavy, Odella would sip from a jar of sweet tea and greet each face that passed. She knew everyone by name, and not just their names but their struggles too. She knew who had lost jobs, who had dreams tucked away like letters they never dared to send, who was barely holding on. Some afternoons, when the shadows grew long and the street quieted, a few young women would stop by and lean against her table. They would start with small talk, their voices low and uncertain. Before long, they were pouring out their worries: how to start a business with no money, how to deal with banks that turned them away, how to sell handmade goods without being cheated. Miss Odella would listen. She always listened first. Then she would pull out a little ledger from under the table, its pages filled with neat, looping script, and show them how to keep track of every dollar. She would explain how to price their goods so they did not lose more than they made, how to save 5 cents from every sale, how to believe they were worth what they charged. "You do not gotta start big to dream big," she would say, tapping a finger against the worn wood of the table. "You just gotta start." But all that happened quietly, without fanfare. In the eyes of most of the town, Miss Odella was just the old lady at the corner, selling soap and baskets no one needed. She was the background of their daily lives, familiar enough to ignore. And so the seasons changed, summer bleeding into fall, winter's cold seeping into spring, and still there she was. A constant. A cornerstone no one knew they leaned on. Until the day someone finally noticed. Monica James had not intended to stay long in her hometown. After spending nearly a decade working in city planning departments across the country, she had only returned to Willow Street for what she thought would be a short visit with her aging parents. But something about the town clung to her, like the thick summer air or the scent of rain on dry earth. It was during an afternoon meeting with the mayor that Monica first stumbled upon the puzzle. She was helping sort through the latest wave of business license applications, a tedious task that involved flipping through stack after stack of manila folders. Most were predictable: a new barbecue joint, a tire repair shop, a beauty salon. But as she sifted through the names and addresses, she began to notice something odd. On the application forms, there was a line that asked applicants to list any mentorship or training they had received. And over, one name kept appearing: Odella Mae Carter. At first, Monica thought it might be a coincidence. Maybe Miss Odella had hosted a workshop once. Maybe it was a family thing. But the deeper she dug, the stranger it seemed. Women from all corners of town, of different ages and backgrounds, all citing Miss Odella as the reason they had learned how to start their businesses. Coffee carts, homemade soap companies, boutiques selling hand-sewn clothing, online shops for artisan candles and jewelry. A small but steady river of success stories, all flowing from the same quiet source. Monica sat back in her chair, staring at the list. How had no one noticed this before? Later that evening, as the cicadas sang their relentless song outside her parents' porch, Monica decided she needed to see for herself. She woke early the next morning and drove down to Willow in Maine. There she was. Miss Odella, wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat against the sun, arranging her table with careful hands. Her baskets were stacked like little crowns. Her soaps were lined up in neat rows, each wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Monica parked across the street and watched. People moved around Miss Odella like she was part of the sidewalk itself. A few teenagers passed by laughing. A man in a pickup truck honked without looking her way. Even the police cruiser that rolled through barely slowed down. But every now and then someone would stop. A young mother balancing a baby on her hip. A boy carrying a homemade birdhouse. A woman with a notepad tucked under her arm. They leaned close, spoke in low voices, and left looking somehow lighter, more certain. It was not a store. It was not a classroom. It was something older, something deeper. It was the quiet weaving of community, thread by thread, heart by heart. Monica felt a strange knot form in her chest. She realized with sudden clarity that Miss Odella had built something far more powerful than any building or business permit could show. She had built a generation of dreamers, and not just dreamers but doers. That evening, Monica drafted a proposal. She wrote until the streetlights flickered on outside and her coffee went cold. She outlined the hidden impact Miss Odella had made, the ripple effect of every woman she had mentored, every family she had uplifted, every small business that kept the town breathing. At the top of the proposal, Monica gave it a title: The Hands That Built Willow Street. City Hall in Willow Street was not much to look at. The bricks were cracked and faded, and the double doors creaked on their hinges. Inside, the hallways smelled faintly of mildew and old coffee, and the air conditioners buzzed louder than the chatter of the clerks. Yet within those worn walls, decisions were made that shaped the future of the town. Monica James stood before the mayor and the city council, her proposal clutched tightly in her hands. The mayor, a heavy-set man named Charles Whitmore, peered over his reading glasses at the first few pages. Councilwoman Ruthie Simmons, who had lived in Willow Street her whole life, tapped a pencil thoughtfully against her notepad. The others murmured among themselves, some nodding, some frowning. "I know it may sound unusual," Monica said, her voice calm but firm. "But Miss Odella Mae Carter is not just a vendor. She is an institution. An economic catalyst. Without her, we would not have half the new businesses we are now celebrating." One of the councilmen, Mr. Reynolds, leaned forward. "You are saying an old woman selling baskets on the sidewalk is responsible for all that?" Monica met his gaze without blinking. "I'm not saying it. The numbers are. The testimonies are. The businesses themselves are." There was a long, heavy pause. The mayor leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. "If what you are saying is true, we have overlooked a pillar of our community." Monica pressed the advantage. "More than overlooked, we have ignored her. And it is time we fixed that." She proposed a public recognition ceremony. A full acknowledgement at City Hall, where Miss Odella would be awarded the town's first Community Catalyst Award. She suggested setting up a small grant program in Miss Odella's name, offering mentorship and seed money for future small business owners, especially young women. The council whispered among themselves. Some seemed hesitant, worried about setting a precedent. Others nodded thoughtfully, seeing not just the justice of it, but the hope it could inspire. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mayor Whitmore rapped his gavel lightly on the table. "We will do it," he said. "Properly." Monica exhaled slowly, her heart pounding with relief. They planned it carefully. The award would be presented at a special session, framed as a routine community engagement meeting so that Miss Odella would not suspect anything. Invitations would go out quietly to the women she had mentored, the businesses she had inspired. There would be music, speeches, and a gathering large enough to show the town's gratitude, but not so large as to overwhelm the woman who had never asked for a moment in the spotlight. As the council dispersed, Monica lingered for a moment in the empty chamber. She looked up at the cracked ceiling tiles, at the faded mural of Willow Street's history that hung on the wall. It was a mural of battles fought and victories won, of parades and harvests and town fairs. Yet nowhere in it was there a face like Odella Mae Carter's. No one had ever painted the quiet battles fought on sidewalks, the victories measured not in headlines but in small, stubborn acts of hope. But that was about to change. Willow Street was about to honor the woman who had, stone by stone, hand by hand, built its future. And this time they would all be there to see it. The morning of the event dawned warm and golden, the kind of Mississippi morning that promised a day soaked in sunlight and sweet tea. Birds chirped in the drooping magnolia trees, and somewhere down the block, a screen door slammed as a child darted out to chase a stray dog. At her usual corner, Miss Odella Mae Carter set up her table just as she always did. Her hands, steady despite the years, moved over the baskets and soaps with a kind of reverence. She hummed under her breath, a song she barely remembered learning, as she arranged everything just so. The rhythm of it was comforting, as sure as the rising of the sun. She had no idea that today would be different. Around mid-morning, a woman in a crisp blue dress approached her table. Monica James smiled warmly, holding a small envelope in her hand. "Good morning, Miss Odella," Monica said, her voice bright with excitement she tried to keep contained. Miss Odella looked up from tying a bundle of lavender soaps with a curious smile. "Good morning, baby. What can I do for you?" Monica extended the envelope. "I come bearing an invitation. There is a meeting at City Hall this afternoon. They are asking folks like yourself, community builders, to come and give your thoughts." Miss Odella chuckled low in her throat, waving a hand. "Oh, child, what would an old woman like me have to say to them?" "More than you know," Monica said, her voice softening. Miss Odella hesitated, the envelope heavy in her hand despite its small size. She was not one for fancy gatherings. She preferred the open air, the rhythm of the street, the hum of passing footsteps. But there was something in Monica's eyes, a quiet insistence that this was not just another town hall. With a shrug and a laugh, Miss Odella tucked the envelope into her cloth bag. "Well, I suppose I can spare a little time." The rest of the day unfolded slowly, almost tenderly. The women who had once gathered around her table trickled by with little excuses, checking on prices, asking about a special order, dropping off fresh flowers. They lingered a little longer than usual, their smiles wider, their eyes glistening with a secret they were careful not to reveal. When the clock tower downtown struck 4, Miss Odella packed up her table, dusted off her hands and walked the few blocks to City Hall. She wore her best Sunday dress, a deep purple one that complemented her rich brown skin, and her straw hat, freshly cleaned and adorned with a lavender ribbon. The streets buzzed with a strange kind of energy. People she did not usually know by name nodded at her, some tipping their hats. Children pointed, mothers hushed them quickly. There was a feeling in the air, something just beyond her reach, like the smell of rain before a storm. When she reached the steps of City Hall, Monica was waiting for her, standing tall and proud, her face lit with joy. "Right this way, Miss Odella," Monica said, offering her arm. Confused but smiling, Odella Mae Carter took it, allowing herself to be led through the double doors, into the cool hall she had never once thought to walk. As they stepped inside, the sound hit her like a wave. Applause. Rising, rolling, roaring applause. Miss Odella froze, her heart hammering in her chest. The chamber was packed, not just the council members but the women she had mentored, the families she had strengthened, the businesses she had helped build. Even the mayor himself stood clapping, his broad hands coming together with genuine respect. Banners draped from the balconies. Flowers lined the walls. In the very center of the dais, under the gleaming lights, stood a plaque engraved with her name. For a long moment, Odella Mae could do nothing but stand there, blinking back the sting of tears. She had thought she was invisible. She had thought she was forgotten. But the town had been watching all along. Mayor Charles Whitmore cleared his throat and stepped to the podium. His voice, usually thick with bureaucracy, carried an unusual warmth as it echoed across the chamber. "Today," he said, glancing toward Miss Odella, "we honor a woman whose hands have built more than baskets and goods. They have built hope. They have built businesses. They have built dreams." The crowd erupted again in applause, rising to their feet, their faces shining with gratitude. Miss Odella stood near the front, her fingers lightly touching the brim of her hat, her heart thudding so hard she thought it might lift her from the floor. Monica James appeared at her side, guiding her gently toward the podium. When Miss Odella reached the front, the mayor extended a hand, helping her up the 3 wide steps to the platform. The wood creaked under her shoes. She turned slowly to face the crowd, taking them all in, the familiar faces of young women she had once counseled over folding chairs and hand-drawn maps, now radiant and strong. The mayor lifted the heavy plaque, reading the inscription aloud. Presented to Miss Odella Mae Carter. For her tireless devotion to nurturing the entrepreneurial spirit of Willow Street, and for sowing seeds of prosperity that will bloom for generations. He placed the plaque in her hands, its weight a testament to all the unseen work she had done. For a moment, Miss Odella could not speak. She pressed the plaque to her chest, feeling the cool metal against the warmth of her heart. The microphone waited before her, crackling softly. The room waited with it. Miss Odella took a breath, slow and steady, and stepped forward. "I did not expect all this," she said, her voice a little shaky but clear. A soft ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. "Truth be told, I never expected much at all." She looked out over them, her eyes resting on each woman she had once encouraged, each dream she had once cradled in her weathered hands. "I only knew one thing," she continued, "that you do not have to have a big building or a big name to make a big difference. Sometimes all you need is a little table, a little faith, and a whole lot of love." The room was so quiet she could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above. She smiled, her teeth white and bright against her dark skin. "Each of you," she said, "carried your dreams like seeds. I just helped you find the soil. The rest, the growing, the blooming, that was all you." A young woman near the front wiped her eyes. Another clutched her infant child to her chest, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. Odella's hands tightened around the plaque. "I am proud of every single one of you," she said, her voice growing stronger. "And I know you will do the same for the ones coming behind you. You will reach out your hands, you will open your tables, you will make room. Because that is what keeps a town alive. That is what keeps a people strong." Another wave of applause rose, almost lifting the roof. Tears blurred Miss Odella's vision, but she stood firm, letting the love of her community wrap around her like a well-worn quilt. As she stepped down from the podium, the council members rushed to greet her, and shook hers. Faces leaned close to offer words she barely caught over the swell of her emotions. Somewhere behind her, a local choir struck up a song, an old hymn about rising from humble beginnings, sung with voices strong and full of history. Monica found her through the crowd, her face alight with pride. "You built this," Monica said simply, tears glistening in her eyes. "You built all of this." Miss Odella smiled, the lines around her mouth deepening like the rings of a mighty old tree. "No, baby," she whispered. "We built it." And with that, she allowed herself, for the first time in a long time, to be celebrated, to be seen, to be honored for the quiet, mighty work of her hands. In the days following the ceremony, Willow Street buzzed with a different kind of energy. Word spread faster than the summer storms, carried by whispers on porch swings and shouted from stoops. Children retold the story at recess. Local newspapers ran features with Miss Odella's smiling face on the front page, the lines around her eyes captured like golden rivers of wisdom. Shop windows displayed photos of Miss Odella next to signs that read, "Inspired by her hands." A bakery started selling lavender honey buns called Odella's Blessings. The hardware store painted a mural on its side wall, a vibrant depiction of a mighty tree with branches stretching wide, its roots tangled deep into the streets, baskets and soaps nestled among the roots like offerings. And Miss Odella herself? She returned to her usual spot on Willow and Main, her table set out like it had been for decades, unchanged except for one small addition, the shining plaque resting against her table's leg, catching the morning sun. People stopped more often now, not just to buy her goods but to talk, to thank her, to ask for guidance. One young girl, no older than 10, approached with a notebook clutched in her tiny hands. "Miss Odella," she said shyly. "I want to start a lemonade stand. Could you show me how?" Odella Mae Carter smiled so wide it felt like her heart might burst. "Course I can, baby," she said. "First thing you gotta know is, you are not just selling lemonade. You are selling a little piece of sunshine in a cup. Always give them a little more sunshine than they paid for." The girl scribbled furiously, nodding with wide eyes. Day by day, the seed Miss Odella had planted continued to bloom. Women who had once sought her advice now returned to mentor others. A community program was formed, offering free classes in budgeting, marketing, and crafting. It was called The Hands of Willow Street, a name suggested by Monica James, who had now permanently moved back to town to help run it. At City Hall, plans were underway to designate the corner of Willow and Main as an official landmark. A bronze plaque would be placed in the sidewalk, not just to honor Miss Odella, but to remind every passerby that greatness often begins with a folding table, a basket, and a dream. Miss Odella, for her part, carried on with her work. She laughed a little more easily now. She walked a little taller, her back straightened not by pride but by purpose. She had no interest in fame or fortune. She only wanted what she had always wanted, to see others rise. In the quiet hours of the morning, when the sun just began to gild the rooftops and the world was still wiping sleep from its eyes, Miss Odella would sit back in her chair, sip her coffee from an old tin cup, and watch the town move and breathe around her. It was enough. It was more than enough. And though no statues bore her likeness, though no grand avenue carried her name, the spirit of Odella Mae Carter lived on in every handshake deal, every tentative dream scribbled on scrap paper, every heart that dared to believe that something small could change the world. She had taught them the most important truth of all, that greatness grows in the cracks of sidewalks, that hope is woven with calloused fingers, that love, real love, is built day by day, hand by hand. And in the sweet, humming heart of Willow Street, her legacy would echo forever. Seasons shifted over Willow Street, painting the town in strokes of gold, then silver, then green once again. Years rolled gently over the cobblestones, but Miss Odella's corner remained steadfast, like an anchor in a river of change. Though the lines on her face deepened and her steps grew slower, her spirit never wavered. Every morning she set up her table. She greeted the day with a quiet determination, the same way she had for decades. She smiled at the children hurrying to school, at the young women pushing strollers, at the businessmen who once overlooked her and now nodded with respect. Her little table became a gathering place. It was not unusual to find someone perched on a milk crate nearby, sharing stories, asking advice, or just soaking up the comfort that seemed to radiate from Odella Mae Carter like heat from the Mississippi pavement. One particular morning, after the sun had just cleared the rooftops, Monica James arrived with a large package wrapped in brown paper. She carried it carefully, almost reverently, placing it on Odella's table with a small, proud smile. "What is this now?" Miss Odella asked, squinting at the package. "Something the town wanted you to have," Monica said. "Something to mark all the tables you have set for all of us." Curious, Miss Odella untied the string and peeled back the paper. Inside was a beautifully hand-carved wooden sign. In rich, smooth letters it read, "Odella's Place, where dreams begin." Below that, smaller and just as carefully carved, "Established by the hands of hope." Tears sprang unbidden to Odella's eyes. She traced the letters with her fingertips, feeling the love and gratitude carved into every groove. Monica leaned in close and said, "This corner is yours, Miss Odella. Always." The city council made it official. The sign was soon mounted on a sturdy post beside her table, gleaming proudly in the sunlight. People took pictures next to it. School children came on field trips to hear her stories. Reporters occasionally visited, scribbling notes furiously as they tried to capture what made this woman and this place so special. But Miss Odella stayed the same. She was not interested in bright lights or headlines. She was interested in the young girl with a dream of opening a sewing shop, in the single father hoping to turn his barbecue recipe into a food truck, in the quiet boy who wanted to build guitars by hand. She listened to them all. She coached them with gentle wisdom. And always she reminded them, start small, start true, and start with love. One cool autumn afternoon, as golden leaves fluttered down around her like blessings, Miss Odella sat back in her chair, breathing in the sweet, crisp air. She looked over her little table, still humble, still strong, and beyond it to the bustling street alive with businesses, music, and laughter. It was a town she had helped to build, a future she had set in motion with nothing more than her heart and her hands. As the sun dipped low, casting the street in a honeyed light, Monica returned with a steaming cup of sweet tea. "Thank you, Monica said, placing it gently in Odella's hand. Miss Odella smiled, lifting the cup in a small salute. "No need to thank me, baby," she said. "Just keep building your table." And as long as there was a dream to nurture, a hand to hold, or a hope to lift, Miss Odella Mae Carter's spirit would live on. Not in monuments or museums, but in every heart that dared to believe they could change the world, one small corner at a time. The Silent Architect. Moral lessons from Miss Odella's story. In every town, in every street, there are quiet figures like Miss Odella Mae Carter. People who are barely noticed by the hurried world around them, yet whose influence shapes lives more profoundly than any grand building or public speech. Miss Odella's story, though fictional, captures a truth too often overlooked. Greatness is not always crowned. Sometimes it quietly kneels beside the weary, offering a hand. Her story is a mirror to society's soul, and from it we can draw deep, resonant moral lessons, not fleeting messages but teachings meant to linger and guide. Let us walk through them, slowly, carefully, honoring the quiet power of lives like Miss Odella's. 1. True impact is often invisible until it blossoms. One of the most powerful lessons from Miss Odella's life is that the most important work is often unseen. For years she sold goods on a small table, offering more than baskets and soaps. She offered advice, encouragement, and the kind of belief that can kindle a dream. Yet she was passed by, ignored, overlooked. This teaches us that true impact is not transactional. It is not something that is immediately rewarded, recognized, or praised. In a world obsessed with instant results and viral recognition, Miss Odella reminds us that the best seeds take the longest to sprout. In leadership, in friendship, in parenthood, this truth echoes. The care you give a struggling friend, the mentorship you offer a young employee, the hours you spend building something meaningful, you may not see the fruits immediately. But someday, perhaps long after you have stopped looking, a tree will rise from the soil you once watered in silence. Odella's impact, hundreds of small businesses flourishing across Willow Street, was not built in fanfare. It was built in unnoticed mornings, in quiet sacrifices, in silent encouragements. This forces us to ask ourselves, are we willing to do the work even when the world does not notice? Are we willing to invest in others without demanding a receipt? True change happens slowly and often invisibly. Miss Odella shows us that it is worth it anyway. 2. Recognition is sweet, but purpose is sweeter. When Miss Odella was finally honored at City Hall, she stood proud. The plaque, the ceremony, the applause, they were beautiful, long overdue acknowledgments of her worth. But what stands out in her story is this: she was already fulfilled before the ceremony ever happened. Her purpose was never tied to recognition. She did not set up her table every day for awards. She did it because it was right. Because it gave her life meaning. Because helping others succeed brought her deep, authentic joy. In contrast, many people today chase validation like a currency, posting, shouting, competing for acknowledgement as if recognition itself is the reward. Miss Odella teaches us otherwise. Recognition is sweet. It can affirm us, it can heal some wounds of invisibility, but it is not the purpose. Purpose itself must be rooted in something deeper. Love, service, community, belief in the worth of small things. Had the ceremony at City Hall never happened, Miss Odella would have continued her work, smiling the same soft smile as she handed a young girl a folded piece of advice. That is a rare and precious kind of integrity. If we can find meaning in the work itself, not just the outcome, we will never be truly empty. And if recognition comes, it is only the icing, never the cake. 3. Small acts of kindness build unbreakable communities. Throughout the story, Miss Odella's acts seem tiny. A conversation here. A suggestion there. A shared notebook full of tips on starting a business. Nothing she did was grandiose. She did not hold conferences or launch national initiatives. She sat at her table and listened. Yet those small acts, repeated, trusted, nurtured, became the foundation of an entire ecosystem of success on Willow Street. This highlights a truth often forgotten. Small kindnesses, consistently given, can change the architecture of a community. It is easy to be cynical about kindness. It is easy to believe that only large movements or sweeping reforms or billionaire philanthropists can fix what is broken. But Miss Odella shows us that real change happens in tiny increments. One person believing in another. One piece of advice shared at the right moment. One young woman encouraged not to give up. Each kindness is like a brick. Alone it may seem insignificant. But stack enough of them together, day after day, and you build a shelter strong enough to house generations. The modern world often underestimates the power of these small gestures. Yet anyone who has ever been lifted by an unexpected kindness knows the truth. A few words at the right moment can save a dream. Miss Odella's table was not just a vendor's stand. It was a lighthouse, a crossroads, a sacred space where belief was transacted without a receipt. If more of us committed to the slow daily work of small kindnesses, what might our communities become? For greatness has no costume. Society is obsessed with appearances. We are conditioned to equate greatness with outward symbols. Expensive clothes, massive stages, best-selling books, luxurious offices. But Odella Mae Carter wore no expensive suits. She operated from no grand platform. She sat behind a folding table with worn hands and tired feet. And yet she was a giant. Her greatness lay not in her appearance but in her soul. This truth must be shouted in a world drowning in curated images and manufactured prestige. Greatness does not always look like greatness. Sometimes it looks like an elderly woman sitting on a cracked sidewalk. Sometimes it looks like a janitor who knows every student's name. Sometimes it looks like a parent working 3 jobs to feed their children. We must be careful not to mistake flashiness for substance, volume for wisdom, wealth for worth. In Miss Odella's story, we find a call to humility, to look beyond the surface, to recognize the world changers among us who wear no medals and seek no applause. You might pass by them every day, the elderly man fixing bikes for free, the woman cooking meals for her neighbors, the volunteer teaching literacy to prisoners. Look closer. The true heroes often wear no costume at all. 5. The legacy you build is in the lives you touch. In the end, Miss Odella's legacy was not a street named after her or a statue raised in her honor. It was something far more enduring. It was the lives she touched, the businesses she helped birth, the dreams she nurtured into reality. Legacy in its purest form is not a monument of stone. It is a monument of hearts. This challenges our notions of success. The world pushes us to measure our worth by what we own, by the scale of our achievements, by the size of our audience. But Odella teaches that the real scoreboard is hidden. It is the young woman who started her own store because of your encouragement. It is the boy who dared to dream bigger because you believed in him. It is the neighbors who stand taller because you reminded them of their worth. Your legacy is not your possessions or your resume. It is the fingerprints you leave on the souls around you. Miss Odella did not seek to be remembered. She sought to help. Ironically, by doing so, she became unforgettable. Thank you for watching and listening to the story of Miss Odella Mae Carter. A reminder that even the quietest lives can leave the loudest echoes in the world around them. We hope her journey touched your heart, and maybe even inspired you to look a little closer at the unseen heroes in your own life. If you found meaning in this story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story filled with inspiration and hope. We have many more powerful stories waiting for you, each one crafted to uplift, teach, and remind us all of the beauty hidden in ordinary lives. Be sure to check out the other videos on our channel. You never know which story might change your day, or even your life. Until next time, thank you for being part of this journey.